Kind of talking about operationalizing change, Nate and Rob gave you some great ideas on what you need to do. And now the question is, how do you actually get that ingrained within the DNA of your organization? And so the subtitle for this is Fear, Scarf, and the Valley of Despair. How many people are familiar with those three things? Well, let me ask it this way. How many people are familiar with fear? Raise your hand. Thank you. Okay. How many people are familiar with scarf? Just a couple. And how many people are familiar with the Valley of Despair? How many people have been in the Valley of Despair? Okay, now we got more hands going up. All right. Very good. A CEO, Bob, called me about 1.5 years ago, and he said, Tom, I've tried everything, but I just can't get my people to buy into change. I said, well, Bob, what have you tried? He said, well, I've tried rewarding them. I've tried incentives. I gave them Friday afternoons off. I tried threats. I tried punishments, and nothing is working. Bob, I said, maybe you've got the wrong people. Now, that may seem a bit flippant, but let's think about that for a second. How do you create change in an organization? How do you take some of the concepts that Rob and Nate talked about and actually make them happen? Make them part of your DNA, make them part of your culture. That can only happen when your people buy into it. And in a word, what's the one thing that keeps people from change? Nate said it. Fear. And let's just take a look for a second at some things people are afraid of, because I said to Bob, the CEO, I said, Bob, there are just a couple of concepts I need you to understand, and then there are just 3 things that I need you to do. And with that, Bob's company grew 37% last year. The first concept is the concept of fear. So let's look at some of the things people are afraid of. And you can just think to yourself if these are rational or not. 30% of people are afraid of things from the past that can't even be changed. 60% of people are afraid of things that will never take place. 88% of people fear some type of health issue that will never happen. And 90% of people fear things that they themselves classify as insignificant. So we're afraid of a lot of silly things, it seems. And here's the one that kind of struck me. 57% of Americans fear the wrath of God. Now, I don't know what these 57% are doing every day, but I'm suggesting that maybe they ought to take a look and do a few changes if this is one of their biggest fears. But the second concept that I needed Bob to understand was this thing called scarf. Now, we have this thing called the limbic system, and I know it's a Sunday morning and it's early, and I'm not going to get all neuroscience on you, so I'm just going to explain it in simple terms. You've got a lizard brain back here that in 1/5 of a second tells you to fight or flight, right? Clearly, this guy right here knew he needed to run really quickly. He didn't have to think about it, okay? Same thing with this guy. He said, I need to save my beer, right? He didn't have to think about that. And finally, here's a little moose, and the moose is saying, I know I'm supposed to run, I just don't know which way. In other words, his lizard brain was sending a signal to him to do something before his prefrontal cortex could actually rationalize or even decide what to do. I guarantee you, if a hippopotamus was chasing me, I'd be running before I thought about which direction to go. And it comes from a model from a guy named David Rock. And he talks about some of the things that Nate was starting to get into, and I'm going to try and bring it down a little bit further even and give you some just practical things you can work with here. SCARF is an acronym, and it's the 5 things that your body reacts to, that your lizard brain reacts to before your brain up here has a chance to really think about it or rationalize. And SCARF stands for this: status. What's your relative importance to others? Now, I want you to think about this in the context of change, and in the context of fear, and in the context of the last time you had that icky feeling in your gut that something just wasn't right. And also think about this in the context of how does it impact your people? How does it impact your customers? How does it impact the people that you work with? You could even take this. How does it impact your spouse? When you create change, you're threatening people's status. And they're going to react to that because unconsciously, it's going to release bad chemicals that their body is going to react to. So is their status being threatened? So as you're starting to do this, so just understand that's one thing. The second, is their certainty being threatened? Right? Obviously it is. Things are going to change. We don't know what the future is going to hold. And so the certainty is being threatened. Next, think about their autonomy. Are you taking something away? Are you taking away their ability to do something, their ability to make a decision? Right? How many times have you said to a direct report of yours, hey, I need you to do X? Has anybody said that in the last few weeks? Just see hands. Come on. There's a few of you out there. Okay, thank you. I know it's early. Just humor me for a little while. Instead, what if you had approached them and said, hey, here are two options. Which one do you think is best? Now, all of a sudden, you're opening up their autonomy. You're giving them a choice, as opposed to, I need you to do X. And sometimes you do. It's just the way it is. But honestly, when you say, I need you to just do X and that's it, that's like, hearing footsteps behind you on a dark night on the street. I mean, that's immediately just releasing fear, right? Because you're threatening their autonomy. The fourth thing here is relatedness. And that's a sense of safety with others. Do I feel like I'm part of the tribe? Do I feel like I'm part of the team? Or is change going to end up with me getting kicked out? As Nate was saying, hey, if we don't celebrate failures, right? If we don't celebrate those things where we're trying to do something, where we're trying to learn, what happens? Right? We get that icky, sicky feeling that just, wow, I'm not part of the team anymore. They're going to kick me out if I make a failure. And finally, fairness. Do I feel that I'm being treated fairly? Those are the 5 things that as human beings we react to all the time in our lizard brain. And I said to Bob, the CEO, I said, if you understand these concepts, there's one more concept I need you to understand before we move forward. And I give you the 3 things that I need you to do to create change within your culture and your DNA. And that was this, the valley of despair. When change happens, the first thing we do is we go into denial. And we say, nope, not going to do it. Right? And so what you need to do as leaders is create alignment and say, yes, this is the direction that we're going. But after denial, what happens is we get really frustrated because it's new, it's different. How many people have done the exercise where you fold your arms and then you try and fold them a different way? Let me see a show of hands, because if there's not a ton of people, we're going to do it. All right, so not enough people. So fold your arms, everybody. Let me just see it. Okay. And after denial, we get into frustration. And when we have frustration, keep your arms folded, please. Right? What we need to do there is really maximize communication. And that's going to be one of the 3 things that I asked Bob to do. Now, unfold your arms and refold them the other way. That's all change is. It just feels weird, right? So we get frustrated. Finally, we fall into depression because, this is not like the old way. The old way was so much better. We want to do it. When they get to that stage, what you need to do is spark motivation, create excitement, create a reason, a purpose, as Nate said, to go forward. After you do that and you create that spark, that excitement, what's going to happen is they're going to start to experiment with a new way. And there, what we need to do is we need to start to develop capacity. And finally, they're going to get to a point of acceptance. They're accepting the new way of doing things. And there, what we need to do is share knowledge and really maximize our integration of the new way of doing things into the organization. Now, talked a lot about fear and depression and denial and frustration. So let me just kind of bring it home by saying that, look, a little bit of anxiety is okay. And this is from Judith Bardwick's book, Danger in the Comfort Zone. And she looked at anxiety levels and she looked at productivity. And on the left-hand side, you're going to see there's no pressure, no anxiety, and there's actually very low performance. Now, I pretty much I can guarantee that this represents any state's Department of Motor Vehicles, right? No pressure, they don't care if it takes you 20 minutes or 3 hours. It just doesn't matter. There's no pressure. there's no anxiety, and there's low productivity. In fact, what that creates is a culture of entitlement, where they just expect to get paid because they showed up breathing every day. And that's a horrible way for people to live. And so what we found is that you actually need to create some of that pressure. And change creates a lot of pressure. And every organization is different, but you have to decide where your organization fits on this chart. Because we can't go all the way over to the right-hand side to a culture of fear, where people are saying things like, you know, I better write a CYA letter, or I don't want to make that change, or if I do this, I may get fired, right? Instead, what we want is we want to operate in that middle zone. Because here's another thing that we found. People's motivation and productivity is the highest when there's a 50% chance of success. When there's a moderate chance. It's not too easy, so I don't care, that's entitlement. It's not too hard, I'm afraid to fail, that's fear. But it's in that middle zone. And so as I was talking to Bob, I said, Bob, if you understand these concepts, the concept around fear, the concept of SCARF and how that's going to impact as you go through change, and you understand that a little bit of anxiety and pressure is okay, we actually want to create a little bit of anxiety, I said, what you really need to do is first look at yourself. And if you guys remember this from the movie, Chevy Chase is saying, who, me? Right? And I said, yeah, Bob, it starts at the top. As goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. And that doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or you're running a sales group or you're running production or products. It doesn't matter what it is. It starts with you. Are you open to change? Are you celebrating change? Are you celebrating people taking risks? Are you celebrating the fact that people are going to ask that question? What else can we give the customer? What else could we do to make life easier for them? So first thing I said, Bob, is you have to look at yourself and you have to look at your leadership team. So that's number one. That's the first thing I want you to do when looking at operationalizing change. The second thing I said is you need to look at your culture and your core values. Do you have values like these? Respect, honesty, integrity, teamwork. Yeah, yuck. I mean, really. How many times you sit there and you go, Tom, you have all the skills to be just the best, most fantastic sales leader we've ever had in the organization, but I'm really looking for somebody who doesn't have integrity and isn't honest. I mean, do you ever interview people that way? No. I mean, come on, these are permission to play values. So let me give you some other ones that organizations have used to help drive culture and change. Grow or die. Always get better. Find a better way. Live with urgency. Let's just take that first one for a second. When I say grow or die, how many people, just give me a show of hands, kind of intuitively, automatically knew what I was talking about? What behavior I was expecting? Yeah, pretty much all of you. When I say, like, innovate, how many people now know really what behavior I want? I mean, conceptually, yeah, you probably understand it. But when I say grow or die, every person in my organization immediately knows what that means and what I expect from them, frankly. Always get better. That's another great one, right? Are you getting better every day? Now, here's the key, is that you can't just get some things like this that describe the behaviors you want and stick them on a wall and forget about them. You must hire, fire, and reward around these core values. If you truly want to operationalize change, then you need to walk the talk and you need to hire, fire, and reward against core values like these that support your belief system. So Bob, I said that's the second thing you need to do. Third part of that is how do you operate? And here, what I'm really talking about is communication. So I said, Bob, you need to change how you communicate because the average person has to hear something 7 times in order for them to hear it for the first time. Now, I was told a joke about this, and I said, how did you ever get to 7? Right? And they said, well, you have to tell men things 14 times before they hear it and women only once. And so the average comes out to be about 7. But are you being open and honest and direct with your employees in the moment? And I've got some little animals here because they align with some rules that we have around communication with our employees. First is don't beat a dead horse. If the issue's been solved, let's move on. The second is let's address the sacred cows. Nothing should be sacred in the organization. I'm sure that there were people at Blockbuster, right? that said, no, we have to do video. We have to have retail locations. That was their sacred cow, and as Nate said, look what happened to them. Address the elephant in the room. And finally, call out the BS and don't be the bully in the room. And these are represented by my little animals here. But when we're talking about communication, we do have to do it again and again and again. In fact, you need to really do it ad nauseum. And you can see in the little Dilbert cartoon here, the person is saying, hey, did you left the note? Did you get my voicemail? Should I tell you what the voicemail and my note and my email said? And Dilbert goes, there's something wrong with you. I think it's actually the opposite of that. As you're communicating about change, you're communicating about your core values, you're communicating about how you're going to operate as an organization, you need to over-communicate. And I'm going to leave you here with a quote from Abe Lincoln. Be open, direct, and honest in all communication. As you are operationalizing change, as you are driving it into your organization, there is nothing more important that you can do than to over-communicate and be as open and honest with everybody in your company. I kind of gave away my closing there a little bit earlier when I told you what happened to Bob's results over the past year, but he called me a couple of weeks ago and he said, Tom, you're absolutely right. Once I understood that change was causing fear, and I understood that I could address those 5 things, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, I looked at myself and I realized I was not hiring, firing, and rewarding around change. I wasn't driving that core value into the organization. I wasn't talking, but when I started to, then all of a sudden what happened was my organization accepted it. They embraced change, and now it's become part of our culture. They're now one of the most successful companies within their industry. And as I said earlier, they grew 37% last year. I leave you with these thoughts around change. Look at yourself and your behavior, what you need to do. Create an aspirational value and hire, fire, and reward against it. And finally, over-communicate to a point that it just feels like, ad nauseum, and the employees are coming up to you saying, yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got it. You told us that last week. Continue to do that again and again and again. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.